Hello, today we're taking a first look at BioRender, which is a web graphical tool so you can create diagrams much more quickly in a number of scientific fields, literally in minutes. It is quite straightforward, and I'm going to just go over a quick tutorial of assembling this, which is the first diagram I've made in BioRender. I choose new illustration. I don't want to use a template for this. I just want to take a quick look over. We've got icons. We have all the cellular and macromolecules, as well as human anatomy, labs, and back down into cellular structures and inorganic and organic chemistry, mostly organic. There's a number of templates if you already have something in mind. In this case, I wanted to create motor reflex arcs. Hopefully this hasn't already been done. I didn't see it, but that would be something useful to create. No, so we're going to start with icons. So to begin with, I tried a few different variations of organizing this information. Really what I want to communicate is first the simplicity of the reflex arc, and then second, more detail for those people who are interested in the nitty-gritty of it. So initially, I wanted to choose something that everyone can relate to, which is stepping on a piece of Lego. I searched for Lego, and because it's a trademark, I doubt they have that. However, I found a suitable stand-in under protein enzymes, and I scrolled down. I looked for something I didn't want to step on, and then I chose a different color. It's a little more aggressive. And I chose one with the outline, so it'd stand out more against the background that I've been using. So that was my first part. Then to add a text field, I just wanted here to insert text, and then I left everything default. If you want to, there's all like the standard text editing tools. Then I went back up human anatomy and neuromuscular. I wouldn't even have to do this much really. I could just search foot. And we had an uninjured foot, but I was interested in that injured foot. Although this picture is for a chronic wound, in this case it's just illustrating an acute injury. And so this is our step one, is our stimuli. So I'm trying to communicate when you step on the Lego, you get an ouchie on your foot, and then that goes into the spinal cord. This should probably use a label now that I think about that. So I'm going to add one. So because it's descriptive, the font up a bit. I don't want it as big as my titles. And then I'm going to add a second text box. I'll make it italic for cross. Now, because the stimuli, the nerve signal from the sensory nerve, is sent to the posterior horn of the spinal cord, I had thought about rotating this. So if I wanted to do that, can I do this? I could show that it goes to the posterior horn. And then my efferent nerve is headed out from the anterior horn. The problem with this is every single textbook I've ever seen ever shows the spinal cord in the same orientation. So it's better to just go with what the general knowledge is. So you can see how easily I'm changing these diagrams. And okay, so here, this is, I don't know if I moved it or something, but I'm going to zoom into that area. And I'm going to show you how I did it. So to do this, I did insert shape, which gives me that. Now, kind of two challenges here are we need to get three things happening. One is I want the interior fill to be transparent. So I just went to fill color, and this is my alpha channel, or alpha transparency, so I could change it numerically. So I just knocked it down to 30 somewhere. So now I have like a magnifying kind of glass effect. Then I want this outline border color to match with these two lines. I'm just going to zoom in a little more. So for my magnifying lines, I choose color preset. I just chose the first one. And then when I click on my magnifying glass, I can choose the first preset also. If I do this, I'm going to have to reset the fill color. But you already know how to do that. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is just line up these. So there is a snap turned on. Maybe I can't snap things in this close of a... Oh, I see. Okay, we'll come back to that. Basically, I want those lines to line up with an edge of the circle. So technically it should be the exterior border. There may be a snapping issue I'm not aware of. I'm zoomed in quite a lot, so let's go with that. Okay, so we're gonna delete this object. Now the other thing you would have needed to know, if you didn't create this in the order of where you're gonna place them, I have this arrange order so I can send to back. And the sending to back will go behind my background, so that's not good. I can send to front, so it'll be on top of everything else. So that's a standard kind of arrange things. I can just delete it with the keyboard. So I'm going to zoom back out to 100%. So what's good about the vectors is you can zoom in and out and you don't lose any detail. There's no pixelating or jaggy edges happening. So let's talk about the background. So to make the background, I created a shape of this selection, and then I made it the size of half the canvas. And then because I want to have graphics that stand out on top of it, I chose like a very neutral color that's not going to like conflict with any of the information. Now we did run into a bit of a thing on this side where some of these colors were close, so then we added like a secondary background color bar. Now when you're trying to select things, I'm selecting this and selecting that, and I keep grabbing the background. So what I did, I arrange, send to the very back, and then I lock the object. So if you look at the locked objects I have here, this is a locked item, the other background is a locked item, and then I locked the title. So this is a good time to talk about groups. So for instance, because I wanted to repeat this information here, here, and here, when you do a multiple selection, so let's say I'm doing this, I'm holding down Shift and selecting all the objects that are part of the information, and I'm going to choose group. And now if I move this, they will all move as a unit. So why this is really useful is if I need to duplicate this, if I copy and paste them, so Control C or Apple C and V, depending on your operating system. Now I can copy and paste as one unit. I noticed when I was trying to individually copy and paste these things, so in this case it's not grouped here, when I copy and pasted them, and when I went to move them, oh, it's working, maybe I just clicked poorly, I was getting only one thing at a time. So whatever you're going to be working with as a group, I really suggest using this group function because you don't have layers like Photoshop. Like there is the up and down order, so you could kind of use that to mimic layers, but this group function is also a good way to mimic layers. So then when I group it, I double click and now I'm inside this. So it's a lot like Flash, if anyone used to use the old version of Flash. And then I can click escape to come back out of the level. And because it's a group, I can just delete the whole thing like that. Now, we did run into a order issue here. So now I have to, because I did a group, it came higher in the hierarchy. So I'm going to just reinstate this neural pathway back to the top, its natural status. So when I'm making diagrams, I want to ask myself or someone who doesn't know anything about it, what information am I trying to communicate to them? And I want them to have something that they can identify with themselves. It hurts everyone to step on a piece of Lego. People have different tolerances to heat and cold and that kind of stuff. So I feel like a Lego is a good universal image of an uncomfortable reflex arc. Then I want to show that it goes directly to the spine. And we already talked about the posterior anterior thing. Here's just an overview of what happens. I'm not getting into, were I to teach this, I would save that information for here. This is just so people can understand the basic thing that it doesn't actually go upwards to the spine. So that's why I've included a spine diagram, but I've also lowered the opacity, showing that it's spinal cord is connected to the brain, but the brain's not involved in this particular reflex arc. And then we get the response. So again, there is one more neuron here, so technically there should be another intermediary neuron there. But this initial diagram is just meant to communicate the most basic pathway information. So going from posterior to anterior, and then to the efferent, which will activate a muscle group to take the foot off of the Lego. Now, the magic behind this is this happens faster than our perception. So if we touch the element on the stove or like a tack, our hand will actually retract quicker than our perception of it. Initially, when I was going through and looking up what kind of, if I was going to talk about nociceptors, then I realized that's actually a different sensory pathway because that does travel to the brain because that's involved in like the pain pathways. That's more complicated than we need for this diagram. So whenever you're doing a diagram, you want to think about what's the maximum things that I need to show, and then like, can I take anything away to teach what I want to show? Okay, so let's come over to the secondary here. when I was first laying this out, all of this information was actually in stages here, and then this muscle like led back to here, and it was just a big mess. It was very difficult to understand. So I realized I should just show the overview, and then for people that are interested, then we can get into the nitty-gritty details. So again, stimuli, I wanted some skin, and then they have different colors, a little cross sections of skin. And then in the skin, I chose a sensory or receptor, and you can actually search for it right here. I searched sensory neuron, so there's quite a few kinds. Did not actually look up. Just from off the top of my head, I feel like Pacinian was a pressure sensor, but this would be a good thing to look up if you're teaching a course. Just double check that you are using the correct graphic, because someone will always look it up on the internet during the lecture. So in my layer of skin here, beneath the epidermis and the dermal layer, then I've got a sensory neuron, and the sensory neuron will release a so in this case, it's what they call monotransfers, where it's just one neuron that goes right to the spinal cord. So this is what the synapse would look like, releasing the neurotransmitter. Now, you can't talk about neurotransmitters and synapses without action potential. So I veered away from the neuron and I looked into some of the graph icons, and I found these neat temperature color things. So I thought it's like a different way to identify the action potential. If they've already studied this material, they will know what an action potential looks like. But if not, I found this friendly way of describing it. So we're, in this case, green is zero stimulation. I'm not even talking here about temporal or summative action potentials. Like, a diagram should just choose a level of difficulty, because otherwise you're going to end up in like a turtles all the way down, turtles all the way up, infinite regression, trying to explain like everything, when really we're just trying to tell them three things. Step on something, goes right to the spine, goes right back to the muscle, take your foot off. This could use an arrow, so let's add one. I use the gradient one to show it's like an action. Hopefully that's clear. So in the action potential, you need to reach a certain number for the neuron to fire. So in that case, I was showing if it goes halfway, it can return back to zero. And then if it fires all the way, then we get firing of the neuron. It passes the signal along. So again, here I was just searching sensory neuron. And the first time I chose the unmyelinated one. But then when I was adding the motor neuron, I chose a myelinated one. So I just decided they should just match each other so it's not confusing. Now, here's something I will have to look up in more detail, which is this neuron is supposed to interface directly with the spinal cord, but this is not a sensory, it is a sensory neuron, but these are synapse endings. So I think I should flip this. Those are terminal buttons. So whenever you make a diagram, it's good to talk through it. Oops. So if I make a mistake, I can just do undo on the keyboard or undo there. These should line up. So here I'm showing that the sensory neuron goes to the posterior horn. Now if the anterior horn is your motor neuron. Again, technically there's a intermediary neuron here. Then from the terminal button, I have a zoom factor. So I did the exact same thing before. Did the shape and then drew it to the size I wanted. And then in fill color, I dropped the alpha down so I could see through it. And this one I found from just searching a motor or a muscle, I believe. So if you want to delete the whole search at once, was above this guy. So you should probably search motor neuron. There we go. And I just dragged it out. So something when you see these little boxes at the bottom of the template is if I search, so because I don't want to select my magnifying glass, I'm just going to lock it. And then this is a group. So I can double click it, and now I can edit inside the group. And then here I'm just showing that the motor neuron would stimulate the muscle, and then the muscle would react. Doing something like this. A contraction, most likely. Well, technically in the muscle group, the antagonist would do the opposite of whatever the agonist was doing. So one would contract and the other would relax to allow the limb to move away cleanly from the painful stimuli. So just in organizing your information, think about what you want to show overall. Then if I was breaking this up into slides, this would be like a secondary slide, tertiary, quaternary. Actually, I would put these on the same slide because it's basically the same information here that I'm communicating. And I'm quite happy with this diagram. It came together very quickly. The things I realized working with BioRender is like you definitely want to use groups. That's going to help you keep all your information organized. So using like the arranging the layers in the groups allows you to simulate having layers to like a sufficient amount where it doesn't feel like it slows down the workflow at all. And since I'm not gonna be there, this is like a diagram. Should add some more labels in here, what these things are. Obviously, if you've seen them so many times, it's obvious to you, but people probably don't look at neurons all day, every day. So some descriptive text of a smaller nature would be a good idea. It's a pretty impressive tool for how quickly you can get up to speed. I didn't make anything custom of my own. Had I, though, I could have just gone to this upload, and then I could have uploaded a file and put it here. Let's say it was like the logo for the school or the clinic, wherever I was doing a talk. So I do have this nice empty space here. Negative space is good, though. You don't have to slam a piece of information in every single thing. From a graphic design point of view, these should... Okay, I can just clean this kind of thing up. So I'm going to unlock my object. Technically, we're only looking at one arc, too. So Now there is this kind of centering tools, but I've drawn this myself, so I need to space it manually. So I'm going to come out of the group and then just take it off the ceiling a bit. And then escape on the keyboard. Do like it jutting out just over. Oh, remember I locked the magnifying glass. So I'm going to undo those moves. Come back and unlock my object. Grab everything here. I'm just using the arrows on the keyboard to move it down. Another little trick, if you're trying to line up things, and you could turn the grid on, or I could also make, usually hold down Shift and send a line right across there. So that'll let me know where the stimuli should start. Easier way, probably just turn the grid on so I could see where the things are lined up. And I will duplicate this object. This information is not as important. So I will use a smaller font. Okay, this kind of stuff you can spend a lot of time just sort of doing tiny edits, but ideally you want to have the same number of spaces against each border in there. There we go. Again, so if I was going to use this, I break these out into maybe different diagrams. So if I wanted to do that, all I would need to do is box select this whole thing, and then I can copy and paste that using the menu here. I'll make it a group just to see if it copies better. Copy, and then I'm going to choose, better save this. I had given it a name previously, so you should save your document. And I got 5, so I'm just doing, oh, here, slide. Perfect. So then for my slide, I can pop that stuff in there and scale it, and then I can start adding more detailed information or texts. So I can just type this arc slide. I like to use underscores because that way if you take a file across aberrant systems, nothing bad is going to happen. If I go back to my gallery, I will see here's my reflex arc diagram. So let's say I want to share it now with my buddy. So I'm stepping on Lego. So I'm going to choose export PNG, and I'll choose export. And now that's saved to my hard drive. Of course, all scientists know you should always cite everything that you use or do in that paper. I'll fill this out later. Nope, it was good. Let's say I have friends who don't like getting files on USB keys. I could add their emails in here, and then I could say, oh, here's my first diagram I made with BioRender. It's so great. And then send it also like that. Isn't that fun? Cute icons. Okay, so to get out of this, I will choose cancel. So that's a quick overview of BioRender. I'd say I picked up most of the features in like under an hour. So that was pretty intuitive, I have to say. What I also found useful is if you look in their YouTube page, they have good tutorials about laying out information. There's obviously still a few kind of graphic design things for this that can be lined up. But I think it's a very useful tool and very quick to get started for making scientific things. Next time, I think I'll try and do a chemical pathway like Krebs cycle and then see how that goes. Thanks for listening. This is a quick overview of using BioRender to make a motor reflex arc diagram.